Well, along with being a cybercrime and forensic technologist who worked with NASA for so many years, Tom Talleur is an avid world traveler, a motorcyclist, now that we know that too,
Wow.
cross-country motorcyclist, a travel writer and editor of rovertreks.com. Awesome website. If you're into travel, you want to hook up with that website. His feature-length stories span travel, technology, history, culture, cybersecurity, national security, military affairs, languages, communications, technologies, and law. It's a good thing this isn't a Champagne Sunday show. I wouldn't get through that with my sips of champagne. He is back on Big Blend Radio's show today. Today is our travel and tourism show, and he's going to talk about cybersecurity for travelers. I think this is so important, especially when we'll go to a downtown and it's like open Wi-Fi for all. And that means for all. So he's going to share some tips with us as travelers of what we can do, and just, hey, downtown, hoppers. If you're hanging out there and going to your local coffee shop, you got to be aware. So, welcome back, Tom. How are you?
Ladies, thank you for having me back. Doing great. How are you?
Doing good. Getting ready to get back on the road of our Love Your Parks tour, and so I know this is going to be very, very beneficial for our listeners, but Nancy and I are taking notes because we know we're going to be out in open Wi-Fi world, and that's kind of scary, huh? What do you think about it?
Yeah, in your opening comment, when you talk about open Wi-Fi for all, it really means open for all the criminals that want to intercept everything you're doing while you're sitting at a Starbucks or sitting wherever you're sitting trying to do your work.
Yeah, and when we talk about, this open Wi-Fi, a lot of times we'll think of people with laptops or tablets, but doesn't this also mean on your phone when we talk about cybersecurity?
Absolutely. Any device you use to talk to the Internet, keep in mind when you're on the Internet, you're reaching out and touching something else, usually somebody else at the end of another device electronically. It's just like reaching out and doing a handshake to someone in corporeal space. The difference is in cyberspace, it's all electronic. And what's important about that is that what you reach out and touch you is touching you back reflexively. If you keep that in mind, it sort of tears down this sort of virtual vapor wall that we have in our minds that we're anonymous. We're not anonymous in cyberspace. Everything we do can be tracked. Everything we do can be hacked. The bad guys know that, and that's why they, for example, sit out in places like Starbucks and other public Wi-Fi spots at airports and try to intercept signals. If they can catch what you're sending in the clear to your bank or to some other entity you're trying to transfer money to or some outfit you're doing, whatever you're doing with, they can use your login credentials and then try to get into other accounts that you have.
Oh, wow. So maybe we should also watch what our login credentials are. If you use one thing for multiple accounts, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I sent you a list, and I know you're going to share it with your viewers, but let me get to some of the do's and the don'ts of being in cyberspace because this borders right now on one that we're talking about. I've been doing this for more than 20 years, but it seems like it hasn't caught up with everybody commercially yet. It's really important to use a virtual private network tool on your computer. What you do basically is you subscribe to a service like NordVPN or Golden Frog's Viper VPN. There's a whole bunch of them out there you could subscribe to. And what you're paying for is a service that takes the communication transmission from your computer and encrypt it to a remote server. And then you do all of your transactions, whether you're surfing or sending email or doing something else, sending photos, through that remote server. And this hides first of all, it encrypts all of your traffic so people like your internet service provider or Google or others can't see what you're doing, which means the hackers can't see what you're doing because it's encrypted. And second, it masks your internet protocol address about where you're coming from because it shows you're coming from the remote server, not from your computer. The downside of using a VPN is you're trusting a third party, a commercial third party, who themselves, if they're hacked, could pose a problem. But as far as I'm concerned, between the lesser of two evils, you're trying to make some effort to make a prophylactic for yourself in cyberspace. So using a VPN is really important. We talked about this on your last show back in November, I believe. I think it's good to reemphasize again here. There's a lot of them out there. A lot of them are offering sales. I think it's really worth doing because of the privacy features. It keeps people from analyzing what you're doing and then selling your data to somebody else. So there's a lot of good benefits to using a VPN, and that's number one on our list. And I know when you release the list on your site to your viewers and listeners, they can read it and decide for themselves what they want to do.
You know, I think this is important too to understand is, you know, when I look at what we do in the of websites and even like our podcasts and things, and everyone's like, here's your audience traffic. There's this whole gray area that no one can like say anything about. It's going to be the VPNers. I'm like, this is the VPN territory. You know?
Well, the good software has what they call a kill switch in it for VPN software. So when you go to a public site, let's say the airport in Dallas, Texas, and you turn on your laptop or your phone, and it picks up the public Wi-Fi, a kill switch in VPN software will prohibit your device from talking to the network until that VPN connects first. It won't let anything else talk to it. That's a good thing. That means it kind of takes it out of your hands until it gets working. Otherwise, all the transmissions you're sending in the clear. So that's a feature to look for when you're buying VPN software subscription.
You know, it's interesting when I look at our website traffic and I go into the analytics right through the server, things have changed over, I would say, the last 7 years or so. When you're looking at stats of what countries are listening to the broadcast or accessing your website and reading things, and there's always some things on there that I'm like, well, who's that and who's that and who's that? And I see the Russian Federation is always there, and it has been there for years as traffic to our website, and it makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, they've been known for years and years and years as an entity geographically in cyberspace that exists to both hack and to create tools for defenses of hacking, because for them it's all about offense and defense. They've been doing it for years. I'll tell you a quick NASA story without taking too much of your show time. Back in the early 90s, we had a very slow dial-up modem connection between one of our NASA centers and Russia. And to facilitate working with the Russians, we helped them build the Russian Space Science Network. And then we put a satellite out someplace and increased the speed of that communication. Within weeks of putting that satellite out, we went from a very slow dial-up modem connection to this high-speed satellite connection. We started getting attacks from the Iron Curtain, from different countries behind the Iron Curtain. And they were holding contests. Let's hold a contest to who can develop the best tools. Let's see who can hold a contest to develop those both offensive and defensive tools. All from these guys. This is in the 90s. So now we're talking, 30, 40 years later?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, this is just ongoing for a long, long time.
Wow. It's wild. And, you know, it's and none of us are going to stop, right, using the Internet, and why should we? It is about being aware, so I don't want to freak people out. But, yeah, it's true. They're out there. I know that. We've seen things happen to websites that it's like, how did that happen? And then you're like, dude, that person didn't really do that, but that one over there that we can't see did it. You know, so it's some crazy things out there. I love that you bring up the VPN. I think that is really important, especially hotels and places like that, and coffee shops, like you're saying, in the public. One of your second do on your list is do use two-factor authentication. Authentication, I can say that. What exactly is that?
Well, what that means is when you try to log into a site, let's take Facebook, for example. Don't just use your user ID and password. Have Facebook send a text code to your cell phone, which is what we call an out-of-band transmission. Your cell phone communications go across the cellular network, which themselves, yes, are attached to the Internet, but technically they're on a cellular network. In the old days, we used to use pagers, which was on the telephone network, which is a circuit-based switch communications network. The Internet is a packet-based switched communications network. What you want to do for security is always do what we call out-of-band communication, so that if someone has intercepted your user ID and password to log on to a site, they can't get in without that second factor of authentication. So if you set up, for example, access to Facebook, in the case of my example here, then them sending you back a text message saying, here's your passcode, your 6-digit passcode, proves that it's at least someone trying to be you getting into your account. And you can do this for your banks, you can do this for your credit card accounts, you can do this for Facebook, you can do it for Twitter. I do it for everything. I do it for my websites. I don't have any administrative access to my websites where there's not two-factor authentication. And by the way, I should say, with respect to your last comment, this issue of not knowing IP addresses where everybody's coming from as they attach to your site from Russia. It's going to get even worse, Lisa, but because under the new GDPR in Europe, the General Data Protection Regulation, many website owners are now having tools updated that sort of wash the IP addresses from your log so you can't see where people are coming from at all. So didn't mean to get off the topic here of what we're talking about with two-factor authentication, but I just thought I'd throw that in. But anyway, to get back to two-factor authentication, it's really good to use. Do it for your credit cards, do it for your banks, do it for just about anything you do online. With cellular service that we get worldwide today, for example, I use T-Mobile. It's good in 160 countries. I want to do anything. Talk to my banks, talk to my kids, do whatever I want to do. I set up two-factor authentication. They know it's from me. I know it's from me. My providers know it's from me. And it's just kind of an easy way to keep out hackers from getting into your stuff.
Right on. And Nancy made me put a password on my phone after many years of not doing it.
Oh, my gosh.
She's like, you've got to do that. If you don't do that, I'm like, and
Mother
now I can't get it off. I know she does. She's like, if a computer has to have a password, so does your phone. Now, malware detection software. I mean, this is never going away either. Malware.
Yeah, this is really important for everybody, especially PC users. Although there's a lot of, there are bad guys developing tools that are breaking into Macs now. Macs were considered more secure over the years simply because they were the biggest target. But I put on my list for you to share with your viewers a software called malwarebytes.com. That's the site. It's free. They can download it. They should run it against their computers in the free version. If they're smart, they'll do it as soon as they hear this because it's quite likely that their computers have been infected with something and they don't even know it. And that's what's causing it to slow down. That's what's causing other people to find out who they are and what they're doing. And that's what's causing them to get all these little mysterious messages and phishing attacks asking them for login credentials or to do something that they find kind of extraordinary, hitting them out of the blue. You need to get the malware off your computer. This is a good tool to use, and that's why I put it on our list.
Excellent. Malwarebytes, yeah. Now you talk about the passwords. This is an interesting thing. Nancy and I, we know each other's passwords. We have very interesting and weird code words, and then we're like, okay, we need to change them, and we can't really have this grouping of families. It's time to overhaul all, especially being on the road so much, and so many of us are flying from different cities, different countries all the time. And so we're in different Starbucks or coffee houses where people are like, hey, I got this, and then we can open everything. So do we need a different password for every single account?
Let me tell you, yes, you do. Let me tell you what I do, and I think it should work well for everybody. Don't think of passwords, think of passphrases. So think of a phrase in your head. It could be something from famous literature, a line from famous literature. It could be an expression that you have only between you and Nancy. And take the first letters of every word in that phrase, or the second letters in every word in that phrase, and make that your password. And then you could add on to it some other, like numbers. It could be a year. It could be your year of birth backwards, and then some symbols. If you follow a pattern, you'll always remember what the pattern is because you know what it is relative to each site you're accessing because you've made that passphrase relevant to that site for some reason. That's one way to do it. Another thing to do is use a password manager. If you use a VPN to encrypt your transmissions, it means your passwords are going to be sent through the VPN encrypted. So if you're using a password manager to keep track of them all, it makes your life a lot easier.
So what about like Google, who wants to remember all your passwords and log in through Facebook and all of that?
You mean save it on your computer or save it on their site?
Yeah, Google always wants you to go. If you're using Chrome, which I know now we're going to have to get into the browsers. We didn't touch on browsers, but I'm thinking I'm going to have to leave the Chrome but it wants to save your password every time you do a new password. It wants to save it.
Well, they do that on purpose. They want to pattern track you, which is what everybody wants to do. They can't market to you if they can't pattern track you, and that's why VPNs are so important. But yeah, I mean, you should save all your passwords offline, and if you save them in your browsers, you always run the risk of having them compromised. If you use the combined methods of using a VPN with passwords that you use a passphrase methodology to with your sites that you're communicating with, it makes it harder for them to be intercepted. And if they're saved on a site and compromised, you can always change it and go back. And if you're using two-factor authentication, even if they get your user ID and password, they can't get into your site unless they're in control of, in this case, your cell phone or your pager, something you're having that text message sent to for two-factor authentication. That's what makes it a lot harder for the bad guys.
And going to the browser part, you talk about Firefox and Tor. Now, I just like the name Tor because I want to go Thor. No, anyway, but you mentioned those being two, kind of safer browsers to use.
Well, the reason I did that, Lisa, is browsers are not all the same, and they never have been, even going back to the early 90s. And if you access a site with different browsers, you'll get different results. They'll display things differently. It's because the standards for programming the web are much better now, but aren't still the same. And then browsers are built a little bit differently. So I listed Firefox and Tor on my list for your listeners because Firefox is built by teams of open source designers that are constantly thinking about security and how to protect you. So they sort of build security in it, and you can add on functionality if you want to later. Tor is an encrypted source browser with using public-private key encryption. It's slower. It raises some issues about ease of use, but the thing you need to remember about all browsers, even those that encrypt everything, is that even though you're encrypting your transmissions, these browsers still send out information about your machine and your machine address. So you're not totally protected from, you're not totally anonymous. There is no such thing as pure anonymity in cyberspace, but they can help you. If you use a browser that's designed to gather information about you by a company that specializes in gathering information about you, it may work quite well, but you're giving up some of your privacy because they can track everything you do, even if you're using a VPN and malware detection and two-factor authentication, because they're in the business of tracking you, as is your internet service provider. So that's the reason I recommend those two browsers. I think Firefox is a good bet for just about everybody, and it's an easy one to get. It's one that's updated constantly, and you pretty much can't go wrong with it, given what we have to do on the internet today.
Well, I just want to say that Comcast is really funny because we'll watch something on TV, and the next morning you get an email about, you just watched this, now try this.
Right.
And I'm like, that's creepy, guys.
No, I know.
It's creepy.
You have a phone conversation, and then next thing you know, you're getting ads for it. It's
right.
It's like getting worse and worse and worse. Firefox. The other benefit of Firefox is when Google sometimes doesn't work for things if you're doing back-end work of things. When you're websites and stuff like that, or even when we do radio shows, sometimes Firefox is the only thing that works because it's not tracking you as much, and Google gets cluttered with its cookies.
Yep.
It has its hand in the cookie jar, period.
If you're a website developer, you have to use Google Chrome, you have to use Internet Explorer, you have to use Safari on the Mac, you have to use Firefox, Tor, because you need to test all these different browsers to see how your site renders to different users on PCs and Macs. But we're not talking about that here. Here we're talking about what the average user who travels can use and to see what works for them. I always have 2 or 3 browsers on every device, and if one doesn't work, I'll use the other. But I use tools to clear my cache and to clear all my cookies and to clear all tracking stuff so that they can't pattern track me even though I'm using a VPN. So it's just a matter of just keeping track of what you do.
Now, you talk about, we've got the user IDs and passwords. One of your lists is like, don't text or email them around. I've had people email me credit card information or text me that. I'm like, no. Or send me a photo of their credit card. I'm like, no. No.
Well, I was helping a group here not long ago. I don't want to mention the group's name on the air here. I was helping a group not long ago with website development, and their webmaster was sending user IDs and passwords in the clear, both across the internet and other ways, to help people that were not logging in correctly or having problems. And it was a security issue. And what this story ought to tell your listeners is that just because someone is a, quote, tech expert at what they do in one area doesn't mean they're a tech expert in another area that's related to what they're doing. It's very common, for example, for developers and system administrators to find the easy way out because they're focused on how to get their product to work to deliver a service. They're not thinking about who's going to exploit it or use it against the users once the service is working. And because of that, they make these simple mistakes like texting user IDs and passwords in the clear. Now, for your listeners as users, as long as they follow the steps we're talking about here, using a VPN, using two-factor authentication, they're going to be fine. But if they need to share their login credentials with someone for some reason, at least try to do it over some encrypted application like WhatsApp or Signal or something like that. Are they perfect? No. Can the government read them? Probably. But, you know, we're not worried about the government here. We're worried about pretty good privacy and keeping hackers and bad guys out of your stuff. The government's going to do what it's going to do. It has limited resources.
Exactly. Yeah, we won't get started on that.
Nope.
I want to go to what you were talking about, downloading. Don't download like pirated copies of software like Spotify. So when you're talking about pirating, like, you know, sometimes there's things on the internet where I've had publicists send me, here's the download link. Instead of using something like Dropbox and, you know, from their own account, they try to use this freebie stuff. And I remember clicking on the wrong thing. It says download here. It was an arrow, download here for this file. I think it was for a musician. This was a few years ago. And I clicked it, and holy hell just took over on my computer. I had all kinds of malware and all these just crazy land happened. And I subsequently said, like, until you get professional, I'm not taking your musicians ever again. Learn how to send files. This is ridiculous, you know.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with dealing with people you don't know, and frankly, it's the problem with dealing that you do know, people you do know. What we're talking about here is herpes in cyberspace. And it's
ew.
That sounds like a new band.
No, I don't know why I went to Dr. Spock in my mind suddenly, but I did. But anyway, once you got it, you can't get rid of it.
I told you at the beginning of this talk that when you reach out and touch someone in cyberspace, they touch you back reflexively. So that's why I said herpes in cyberspace. But it's really true. You really don't know what you're getting, even when somebody sends something to you, even from somebody you know. One of the reasons for my more important communications, you'll see a digital signature at the bottom of my emails that you can go check against a public server to make sure it's really from me and not from somebody that says it's me, is because of this problem with people downloading knockoff copies of some popular software because they don't want to pay for a music subscription or for a photo or subscription or something. That's why I mentioned Spotify, because it was just in the news. I think it was Spotify, but it could have been another vendor. But it was just in the news that some major platform, people have been downloading pirated copies in order to save money, but what they were downloading was Trojan horses into their computer because it was a con. They were being conned into doing this, so that when they installed this software on their computer, all these back doors were now in their computer and everything they had was being stolen. And so what I'm trying to tell your listeners here is don't take the cheap way out. If you want to use a service, get the legitimate software for it, keep it updated, and pay for it, because otherwise you're going to pay for it dearly another way, and that's the other way you don't want.
I always feel more comfortable paying. I don't like the freebie anything. I really don't. It just like, I'm in the same in the grocery store. Sorry, people with the food samples. I'm never eating it.
I feel like we should be using the Trojan on like as a shield for all of our digital devices.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Right.
When we went there, it's like I want to use it a different way.
One time we
well,
got
this relates
email.
a little bit to something you and Nancy maybe was saying a minute ago. You're talking about you just watched a TV show on Comcast the other day, and the next day they're trying to sell you something else.
Yeah.
If you travel with your cell phone with location services on, they're going to pick up the fact that you're in Greece or Kenya or some glacier national park, and they're going to start targeting you for stuff because they know where you are.
Yeah.
So we use location services, for example, on our cell phone when we want some device to know where we are. And as soon as we're done, we turn it off because we don't need it. Plus, it burns up power on your cell phone, so you don't want it on all the time.
Right. That's smart. And can you do it even if you just put it on an airplane? Sometimes helps things too. You know,
of course, because you're cutting off all transmissions then.
That's awesome. These are such great tips, and I can't wait for everyone to read them. Everyone go to nationalparktraveling.com and just type in cybersecurity and you'll find it, or type in Tom, you'll find it, this list. And it'll also be featured in the April through June issue of Parks and Travel magazine. But Tom, one of the things that you talk about also is we get these emails from people, right? Oh, there's that one that's like, oh, I was traveling and someone stole my American Express card. Everyone's had this, it goes around.
Gosh, yeah.
And we've had the Nigerian emails, and some people will think their friend is in trouble.
Well, remember, we got an email that said if I didn't put $20,000 in a brown paper sack and drop it like 2 blocks from where we were living at the time, that they were going to kidnap Lisa.
Yep.
And I called the cops right away, and they came over, and this was years ago. It was really kind of funny because the cops were like, well, I really don't know that much about the Internet. And they suggested that I contact the FBI, which I did.
Yeah.
And I sent the email to them, and it was weeks later, I got an email back that said they caught the guy in Maryland.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. Dude, that was cool.
But there's these emails that there are bad guys at the end of them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think, oh, just delete them and whatever. But some people believe them. We were actually just watching here in Tucson the other night how, emails coming in, the elderly believing it.
Mm-hmm.
I look at now websites having to be ADA compliant, so now that opens the doors to lots more people now really needing to learn and understand the vicious waters of the Internet,
Yeah.
So I think there's
2 stories out in
problem.
the media right now that talk to this point. There was a Caribbean-based scammer who was arrested by the FBI. He was trying to extort, of all people, retired FBI Director Judge Webster, who also used to be the director of the CIA. And they caught him, I think it was in the Washington Post or New York Times, but it was a big scam, and the bad guy had threatened to kill his wife, and he wanted so many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it turns out he had actually scammed a bunch of people out of about $600,000 or $700,000. Don't be intimidated by people that threaten you, because chances are they're just trying to get money out of you. And anybody that sends me a threatening email, I say, bring it on. And
you're gonna get emails now, Tom.
No, I get them all. Hey, listen, the number of attacks that went on rovertrex.com last time I talked to you were like, they went up like 90% for 2 weeks. So I expect it. That's okay. But when it comes to these links and emails, there's one thing you can do. You can hover over the link and click on your computer, whatever command it is. In a Mac, I think it's Command K, and you can see what the link is. So if the link says it's from dairyqueen.com, but you look at that's what it says in the hyperlink name. But when you click on it with a Command K or something else, whatever it is for your computer, to highlight the text or the hyperlink behind that name, it may say, BillysHackerShop.ru, Russia. So I mean, all you gotta do is examine the link, and if it looks silly, don't click on it. Or if you're not sure, just don't click on it at all. I mean, it's just not worth it. There's a lot of things my friends send me, and they say, hey, isn't that cool? And I say, I don't know. I didn't click on it because I don't trust the link.
Right.
I don't know who I'm dealing with. It's not my friends.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're getting it from. This is herpes again.
And don't those letters. There's these letters that go around like that one about the Americans. I lost this. Can you please wire me money? I'm stuck in Panama or wherever it was, and it's written as though it's from a friend. But listen, remember how your friends write, how they talk, and if it doesn't sound like them, don't believe it. And I'm just wanting to say that so that I can play our song "Don't Believe a Word," because it's the truth. When you've got to be an investigator these days before you do things. You need to look at it all that way. Yeah. Yep. Well, we really appreciate your information, Tom. Because hey, let's have a happy travel world. We want to have a good time when we're traveling and out and about, and we're a mobile society, so we're all travelers. That's how I look at it. But you're a rover. There's a difference. You're not a tourist.
Trying to
you're
be a
rover. Yeah.
We're
and if you want to know what a rover is, go to rovertrex.com. Find out.
Thank you. And it's nice to catch up with you ladies today.
You too. And we look forward to following more of your adventures. I love following you on Instagram and Twitter and everyone they're up there, so keep up with them there. So, again, at rovertrex.com, you can also keep up with Tom on his website, tomtalleur.com. And we want to thank the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association for keeping these segments going about tourism and travel. You can keep up with them at ifwtwa.org. But here it is. We're going to play the song, I Don't Believe a Word, and you can dedicate this to all those Nigerian scams and, phishing scams and, even your local politician maybe. Who knows? But here it is. I Don't Believe a Word, and it's from the Brutalists, awesome band. We had them on the show. You can check that out if you go to blendradioandtv.com. Just type in The Brutalists or go to thebrutalists.net and go get their self-titled album. So here it is, I Don't Believe. Take care, Tom.
Bye, ladies.
Bye-bye.
I don't believe a word. I don't believe a word. Don't believe a word you're saying. And you can say it's true. You can say it's true. But the whole world's watching. Don't know what you heard. Life becomes so blurred. And I don't believe a word. And now you're begging me. Now you're begging me. And I gotta stop this problem. And no, you need to go. No, you need to go. Go and feed your lonesome. Want you out of sight. Want you out of mind. Now go. I don't believe a word. Now that I am free, what's it gonna be? Now that I am free from your chapters that you still calling me, and the phone's just erupting, cut you off the line. Now I'm feeling fine 'cause I'm free. I don't believe a word.